Hello and welcome to GBNews Originals. I'm Darren Grimes and I'm delighted to be joined by Bjorn Lomborg, who he's a man after my own heart, I tell you. When it comes to common sense on energy policy, you are my voice of reason, Bjorn, so thank you very much. Now listen, Bjorn, we've just been discussing there off air the idea, the narrative that comes out a lot at the moment, which says that actually the next race to be rich in the Western world, well, not just the Western world, because China's catching up as well when it comes to artificial intelligence. They're the words on everyone's lips. Does that require a lot of energy? Are we an energy-starved nation with incredibly expensive electricity, for example, that's going to be completely priced out of this race?
Yeah, so look, everything requires energy and electricity. So it's not just AI. AI is sort of the idea of how you need more power in order to get rich and get your economy growing. But really anything needs electricity. And what you have done here in Britain is basically drive up the price enormously, mostly for climate reasons. And what that means is you can't afford energy anymore. You can't afford it for AI, but you can't afford it for anything else. Remember, we've also seen almost all homes in the UK reduce their emissions, reduce their consumption. Now, some of that is good because it actually helps the environment, but of course it's bad if it means that you're freezing, if you don't have the appliances that you need, if you don't have the stuff that you want. And driving that price up further is just no good.
Well, the Secretary of State for Energy in this country says, hang on a minute, Bjorn, we're on a climate revolution here in this country. That green technology, the green industry, that's where the jobs of the future are, and that's where the energy of the future is.
Yeah, that's mostly just propaganda. Look, fundamentally what he's telling you is that we can make energy with much more jobs. That's not efficiency. If you can have, in the US, you have one worker doing as much energy in the gas industry as 24 workers do in the solar power industry. That doesn't mean you're now employing 24 people. It means you're taking away 23 other people who could have done other jobs that we also need, from being firemen or school teachers or whatever else. That's a real cost to society. This is not a great thing that we spend more workers doing the same thing as what we could do with fewer workers. And of course, it's not that he's not saying the price is going up. He's somehow claiming, but magically it'll drop in the future. We have no indication that that's true. Of all the nations we know, there's none who actually have lots of green energy and cheap power.
But he would say, hang on, because the price of renewable energy is going down. I mean, does that bear truth?
So he's technically right, and that's of course why they keep making that argument. When the sun is shining or the wind is blowing, you can actually make pretty cheap energy, and sometimes the cheapest energy in the world. But most people don't just want power when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. And when it's not, it's infinitely expensive. And that's of course why you actually have to buy two power systems. You have to both have the solar and wind and a backup system, and that means you're almost stuck with twice the cost. That's not a good deal. That's actually a really terrible deal. And again, we know this from the real world. If you look across all areas, all the nations that we have data for, so about 70 nations around the world, all of them show that the more power you have from solar and wind, the higher the cost. There's none that are cheap. So he's selling you something that is not manifest in the real world.
At GB News, we believe in the power of free speech. We're not afraid to ask the tough questions, challenge the status quo, and give you a voice. While others silence dissent, we champion the truth. By becoming a GB News member, you're not just supporting free speech, you're defending it. Please consider supporting us today. Together, we'll hold the powerful to account and make sure that your voice is always heard. Simply go to gbnews.com/support and stand with us for what matters most.
But the energy mix, what would your ideal energy mix look like for an economy such as Britain?
Oh God! First of all,
were you able to plan it?
Yes, I'm not that expert.
Yeah.
I'm an economist, but also there's something really, really wrong with the idea of saying I should sit or you should sit and decide how we make the energy system in Britain.
But you wouldn't ban solar and wind, for example.
No. Look, solar, for instance, in California, because it produces most at midday, and that's where you need air conditioning. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Up to maybe 10%. And wind power is probably a good idea if you live in Sweden or Norway, where you have lots of hydropower. So you can basically run the wind when the wind is blowing, and then you run your water at the other times. It's like they have giant batteries. That works really well. But it works in some situations, and what we need to recognize is this is not going to work in most, and certainly not in the predominant situation.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, but just finally then, the battle of ideas in this area needs to be won, because the next generation, you read stories, the stats tell us that actually there are an awful lot of young people who quite literally lie awake at night worrying about a climate apocalypse. How on earth can like-minded people such as yourself win the battle of ideas when the narrative is the world is quite literally on fire?
Yeah. So it's a hard one. I mean, if it was easy, it would already have been won. So I think you're absolutely right on both of these points. We first need to point out to people, climate change is a real problem. It's by no means the end of the world. And there's lots of statistics to show this. I'm just going to give you one. If you look at how many people die from climate-related disasters, 150 years ago, it was 5 million people a year. 100 years ago, it was 500,000 a year. Today, it's about 10,000 people. We've seen a reduction in 500-fold. This simply shows you this is not a world that's suddenly on fire. It's actually less and less on fire. Also, literally, we know that from NASA satellites that orbit the world all the time. Fire is also down.
But would people say beyond California, what just happened in California?
Sure. You see more fire on TV because it makes for great clicks and it makes for great stories, but it's not actually indicative of more fire. We have less fire, mostly because we're a smart civilization and we know how to deal with many of these problems. That's what we've done over the last 150 years. So get rid of the scare. Now, there's still a problem, but obviously the problem shouldn't be solved with policies that are much, much more costly than the original affliction that they're trying to solve. You should solve this smartly, and we're not. This is not about putting up lots of solar panels and wind turbines that are still not effective because you still need huge backup. This is about finding the technologies that will actually power the future and that the Chinese and the Indians, the Africans will also buy. That's about innovation. That's how we've solved all problems in the world. We've never solved it by telling people, I'm sorry, would you mind being a little poorer and a little less comfortable and a little colder?
Yes.
No. You're going to solve this through innovation so you can be hotter and more comfortable and richer and solve climate.
And to innovate, you need energy, Bjorn, as well.
Yes, but also money. So we need a lot less money for innovation than the amount of money that we're spending right now on green and policy.
Well, listen, Bjorn, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
At GB News, we believe in the power of free speech. We're not afraid to ask the tough questions, challenge the status quo, and give you a voice. While others silence dissent, we champion the truth. So by becoming a GB News member, you're not just supporting free speech, you're defending it. Please do consider supporting us today. Together, we'll hold the powerful to account and make sure your voice is always heard. Simply go to gbnews.com/support and stand with us for what matters most.